Okay, dun, da, da, da. Super excited. We're going to finish the book today. So we're going to finish our book. There's a little afterwards we're going to read. And then I'm going to ask you just a few fun review questions about the story. You guys are going to type them into the chat. And then I will tell you what your guys' homework is when we're all done. But it is time to finish our book. We are on 232. So remember, it's official. They all believe him now that he is Hermione Calloway's grandson. And he just, he got his new saxophone. He's all excited. I went into my mother's room and put my sax on the bed that my mama used to sleep in when she was a little girl. I put her smiling picture on the dressing table, then reached under the bed and pulled my sax case out. I snapped the 2 silver snaps and started taking out all of my things. I took my old blanket out and remade my bed with it. I wasn't going to need to carry it around with me anymore. I opened the tobacco pouch and took out the rock that said Flint on it and set it on the bed. I took the pouch and the flyers and walked down the hall to Hermione Calloway's room. Even though I could still hear him and Miss Thomas talking and boo-hooing in the room, I knocked on his door anyways. When no one answered, I opened it. He had one of those dressing tables with a mirror stuck on the back of it too. So I walked real quick over to it and set the flyers and the bag of 4 rocks down. I got out of his room as fast as I could. Phew! Even though it was me who'd carried them around all these years, you'd have to be a pretty big liar if you'd say those rocks and flyers really belonged to me. 232. I already said that. Hermione Calloway's name was all over the flyers and his writing all over the rocks. Besides, the way he looked so shook up when he saw those rocks for the first time, I figured they meant more to him than they did to me anyways. I went back over to Mama's dressing table and opened the little drawer. I took one of the thumbtacks out and went back to Mama's bed. I took one of the envelopes that had her big picture in it. I took it out of her riding the sad, saggy pony. I still couldn't see what she was so unhappy about. And Miss B got in Moon Park. The Miss B got in Moon Park looked like somewhere you could have a lot of fun at. I poked the thumbtack into the top of Mama's picture and walked to the wall that she'd stuck all those pictures of horses on. I put Mama right amongst all those ponies and horses she liked so much. I didn't need to carry that doggone picture around. This wasn't how I remembered Mama anyways. Mama was always excited and jumpy, not sad and pokey like this little girl. Mama was kind of old when I met her too. She wasn't young like this picture at all. The picture looked like it belonged. It's strange the way things turn out. Here I'd been carrying Mama around for all this time, and I'd finally put her somewhere where she wanted to be, back in her own bedroom amongst all her horses. I went back to the bed and picked up the flint rock. It was going to be enough. I didn't need those other things with me all the time. I didn't need them to remind me of Mama. I couldn't think about her anymore if there were 100 hours in every day and 1,000 days in every week. I couldn't think of Mama any better than I already do. All I have to do is remember her little hand on my forehead when she asked me something like, "Are you sick, baby? Have you got a temperature?" All I have to do is remember Mama letting me dry the dishes after she'd washed them. How she used to say no one in the world could dry a plate the way I could. All I had to do was take 2 or 3 deep breaths and think of all the books she'd read to me at night. And remember that no matter how long she took me, she'd read until I went to sleep. Dad Malone was right. I was carrying Mama inside of me, and there wasn't anyone or anything that could take away from that or add to it either. The 1 rock from Flint would be enough. I set it in my sax case. I picked up my saxophone. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I wet the reed the same way I'd seen Steady Eddie do, then clamped it to the mouthpiece. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. If after I got to 10, I blew the horn and it sounded pretty good, I knew I'd be playing along with the Dusky Devastators of the Depression in a week or 2. If it didn't sound good. If it didn't sound so good, it meant I'd have to practice for a couple of months before I'd be good enough to get on stage with them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I puffed my cheeks and blew as hard as I could. The saxophone only squeaked, squawked, and groaned. That sounded like it was making up some words like a walk, boop. Shucks. Maybe I didn't puff my cheeks out right. Maybe I was blowing too hard. I counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This time, the horn only squeaked, squawked, and groaned. It didn't sound like I was trying to make up any words. It sounded great. It wasn't perfect. like when Steady blew it, but I could tell that one day it was going to be. Something told me I could learn how to play this. Something told me that those sounds were more than just bad notes. If you didn't have a real good imagination, you'd probably think those noises were the sounds of some kid blowing a horn for the first time. But I knew better than that. I could tell those were the squeaks and squawks of one door closing and another door opening. I looked at the picture of Mama that Miss Thomas gave me. Mama was looking right at me with that same soft smile. I know it's stupid to smile back at a picture, but I couldn't help myself. I know it's even stupider to talk to a picture, especially when it hadn't said anything to start a conversation. But I had to say, here we go again, Mama. Only this time I can't wait. I closed my eyes and began practicing. Shucks. As good as things were going for me now, I'd bet you dollar to donuts that Steady Eddie was going to get here early. Yay! So Bud officially has a home. So I told someone yesterday that this ending isn't my total favorite. I wish this book could go on forever. I wanted to know how Bud's life turned out with his grandfather. I wanted to know if his grandfather ever came around to loving him the way he needed to be loved. But he has a home. He was able to unpack his suitcase, stop carrying around all his rocks and stuff. He doesn't need to carry his blanket anymore. He officially has a home here at the, Grand Callaway Station. So I am so stinking happy for Bud. But we are going to read the afterwards. This is like a note from the author, kind of, and it's just a little bit more about the book, okay? So, although Bud, not Buddy, is fictional, which means it's not real, many of the situations Bud encountered are based on events that occurred in the 1930s during a time known as the Great Depression. And although the characters in Bud Not Buddy are fictional as well, some of them too are based on real people. One of the most enjoyable parts of writing is that an author can combine his or her imagination with the traits of real people to build new characters. This is what I did to create the characters of Lefty Lewis and Hermione Callaway, both of whom are based loosely on my grandfathers. My mother's father, Earl Lefty Lewis, was one of the 6 or 7 redcaps who worked at the train station in the Grand Rapids, Michigan during much of the Depression. The jobs of Pullman porter and redcaps were among the few open to African American men at the time and carried a certain prestige in the black community. Nonetheless, they were extremely difficult jobs, often marked with 80-hour work weeks, low salary, and virtually no job security. These men could be fired for simply not looking happy enough. Grandpa Lewis did exceptionally well during the Depression, supporting his family on tips he received as a redcap. My mother remembers that my grandmother used to have to sew reinforced lining in the pockets of Grandpa's pants because the weight of all the pennies and nickels and dimes and occasional quarters that he was given as tips that would eventually rip the seams out. She also remembers the leathery texture of Grandpa's hands took on from carrying so much baggage at the station. As the Depression deepened, the Grand Rapids train station cut back to 2 redcaps, and Grandpa was let go. He briefly opened a small restaurant and finally became the first African-American cab driver in Grand Rapids, a job he held until his retirement in 1972 at 74 years old. Earl Lefty Lewis also pitched for many years in the minors of the Negro Baseball League. His fondest memories of that time was pitching twice against Satchel Paige. As he did with the opposing pitcher, Satchel hung Grandpa with 2 losses. All right, so that's just a little bit about her grandfather, how she found, her grandfather. Lefty Lewis was based off her grandfather. So, authors take what they have in real life and then, create other things. My father's father, Herman E. Curtis, was indeed a big band leader for most of his adult life. He headed many different musical groups. His favorite being Herman E. Curtis and the Dusky Devastators of the Depression, a name that by itself deserved all 6 of those exclamation points. Grandpa attended an Indiana Conservation of Music and was classically trained violinist. He also played the brass fiddle and the accordion and the piano. Entertainment was an important part of life during the Depression. For people wanting to forget their troubles by going to movies, sitting around the radio, listening and dancing to live music. Grandpa and his band were well known throughout Michigan during the time. Being an orchestra leader was Grandpa Curtis's night job. By day, he wore many different hats. Among those of a chauffeur, boat captain, and truck painter. He owned several businesses in Grand Rapids and Wyoming, Michigan. At the time when laws prohibited African Americans from renting or holding titles to land in these 2 cities, Grandpa did this by having a white friend. He put his name on all the records, just like the band member we heard about. He said that he owned the band and stuff, but really it was Herman's band. The flexibility, people skills, hustle, and willingness to work around unfair laws and situations that both of my, we're going to skip that little middle part, my grandfathers used allowed them to keep their families together during one of America's bleakest periods, a time that was especially hard on African Americans. Both of these men were fortunate and skilled enough to avoid the burnout of the Great Depression. The lives of Earl Lefty Lewis and Herman E. Curtis and the situations described in Bud Not Buddy are the exceptions, for the great majority of people suffered horribly during the period of 1929 to 1941. Parents often could not feed their children, and countless thousands of young people, some as young as 8 years old, were abandoned or had to set out on their own in search of a meal and a warm place to sleep. These children survived the brutal life on the road by riding the rails, picking fruit, doing odd jobs, begging, stealing, or whatever was necessary to get food. Much of what I discovered about the Depression I've learned through research and books, which is the same. I didn't take advantage of the family history that surrounded me for many years. I'm afraid that when I was younger, my grandparents and parents would start to talk about their lives during the Depression. My eyes would glaze over, and I'd think, oh no, not these boring tales again. And I find the most convenient excuse I could to get away from them. Now I feel real sorrow when I think of all the knowledge, wisdoms, and stories that have been forever lost with the deaths of my grandparents. Be smarter than I was. Go talk to Grandma and Grandpa, Mom and Dad, and other relatives and friends. Discover and remember what they have to say about what they learned growing up. By keeping their stories alive, you make them and yourself immortal. So the author's saying, if you learn history and learn about your family, you're keeping them alive. I want you to go back to the two pictures. The one picture is a group of men. It says Herman F. Curtis and the dusky devastators of the Depression. Herman is at the left with the bow. So that is who Herman E. Calloway is based off of, that man with the bow, because that's what he did. He played like the giant brass fiddle. Then on the opposite side, Earl Lefty Lewis, pitcher for the Grand Rapids, Michigan Elsteries, taken May 30th of 1918. So those are who Lefty Lewis and Herman E. Calloway are based off of. So I hope you guys enjoyed this book just as much as I did. I'm absolutely obsessed with this book. I think it is so amazing. I'm going to ask you guys a few review questions, so don't leave me. I'm going to ask you a few review questions because eventually you're going to have to take the lovely AR quiz. But right now, I have some review questions because we still have a few minutes, so we might as well. All right. Let me find it. It was somewhere. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Can you tell me, you can raise we'll just actually say it out loud instead of typing in the chat. Can someone tell me what Mr. Bud's new name is from the band? What is Bud's new name, his full new name from the band? If you want to answer, raise your hand in the little raise your hand thing. Landon, I said raise your hand, but Mr. Landon just answered it, and it is Sleepy LeBone. Sleepy LeBone is his name. That is correct. Does anyone remember the name of the restaurant that the band goes to a lot? It was the first restaurant Bud ever went to, and he said it was like the best food ever. Gage?
The Sweet Pea?
Yep, the Sweet Pea. What was Bud's first instrument that he got to play? Molly?
A recorder.
Yeah, recorder. How did Bud know that the Amoses went through his suitcase? In the beginning of the story, Olive?
Because the knot that he tied was messed up.
Right. Remember, he tied that specific knot and it was all messed up. So he knew, hey, they went through my case. What type of book did the librarian give Bud way back in the beginning? What type of book was it? Olivia?
It was a book on how long it would take to get to one place.
Okay, so that was the book that they looked at together. The book she actually gave him to read by himself. But you are correct. He did look at a map book, but that was with the librarian together. But what book did she give him to like read by himself? Anyone know? Angelina?
The librarian gave Bud a book about the war because she remembered that with his mama he liked to read about them, but he actually just liked the pictures inside of them.
Yes. He said that gone equals something. What does gone equal? Adults say gone instead of what, Paisley?
Dead.
Yeah. Gone equals dead, he said. Who was the girl that Bud kissed? The first girl he ever kissed, who he found in the cardboard jungle? Who was that? Zachary?
Marurga.
That is not her name. Olivia?
Deza Malone.
Yes, Deza Malone. What type of pencil did Todd shove up Bud's nose? What type of pencil did Todd shove up Bud's nose? Anyone remember what it was called? Olive?
Number 2 pencil.
No. The brand of it. I have one, like, I'm looking at one right now. It's still a common brand. He shoved it all the way in his nose, all the way up to the letter R. Does anyone remember what it's called? Zach?
The Negrola.
No. Isaac was correct. The Ticonderoga. Good job, Isaac. Zach, mute yourself. Okay, you did. What type of weapon did the Amoses have in their house? Bud moved it to the back porch. What weapon was that? Isabella Hanlon?
A shotgun.
Yes, it was a gun. Who does Bud think is the most beautiful person in the world? Molly?
Miss Thomas?
Yep. What was Bud's mom's name? What was Bud's mom's name? Hannah Drubert. What was Bud's mom's name? Hannah Drubert, Hannah Drubert, da 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 da. Hannah.
I forgot.
Angela Janet. We just read it yesterday. What type of bug crawled into Bug's ear? Remember, Bugs was named after a bug that crawled in his ear. What type of bug was it? Mackenzie, what type of bug was it? It was not a human that crawled in his ear. What type of bug was it, Mackenzie? Mackenzie.
She said cockroach.
Okay, yes, you are correct. It was a cockroach. Who picked up Bud on the side of the road? Who picked up Bud on the side of the road outside Owasso, Michigan? Hannah Drubert, do you know?
Mr. Lewis.
Yep, Lefty Lewis. And how did he get Bud to come out of... Can someone remember how he got Bud to come out of like the trees and bushes and stuff? It wasn't because Bud was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to come talk to you. It was for a certain reason, Olivia. Why did he do that?
He told Bud that he was gonna give him food.
Yeah, he told Bud, he was like, I'm going to feed you if you come here. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what has to happen over the next few days. Yeah, he gave him red pop and a sandwich, okay? So, not the next few days, over the next like 24 hours. So, tomorrow, before reading RTI, and reading RTI starts at... Reading RTI is at 9:05 again tomorrow. by 9:05 a.m. tomorrow, you must turn in your chapter titles, all of them. Okay, so if that means you got to read through your book again to get it done, you have to turn in your chapter titles by 9:05 tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're not going to have a live for reading RTI. You're just going to have an assignment. Your assignment will be to take the AR quiz. You don't have to take the AR quiz during class tomorrow. You can take it anytime today, but make sure you take it when you have time. And then the second assignment is going to be a little small book review on this book. You're going to give it, how many stars you'd want to give it. You're going to tell me, who you'd recommend it to and all that. So no live reading RTI tomorrow. You will have an assignment. Your assignment will be to take the AR quiz and to do the book review. And chapter titles are due by tomorrow morning at 9:05, okay? Your AR quiz and the book review must be completed by Friday morning, okay? So by Friday morning, I'll be at school. You guys will be virtually, we'll be e-learning at home. Friday morning, I'm going to get on the AR website, and I'm going to make sure that every single one of you have taken the quiz, AR quiz, and you're going to get a grade for that. But does anyone have any questions about what you're going to do right now when we get off? Don't get off yet, but when we get off, you can just finish your chapter titles and get that turned in. And then reading RTI is going to be over because it's almost time for math RTI. Tomorrow, I'll have the assignment up for you. You'll just have to take the AR quiz and you'll have a short little book review to do. Okay? Any questions? And I'm going to come around. So probably Monday or maybe tomorrow afternoon, if you're done with the book, you can give me the book back. Those of you that are virtual, I'll get the book back, eventually someone can drop it off or whatever. But if you don't need your book tomorrow, you can give it back to me. But I'll collect them eventually. Are there any questions? If not, I want you guys to get off and finish your book titles right now. Okay?
Bye.
Go finish your book titles. Bye, guys.